Story 1. I was held up at gunpoint in the middle of the desert with no cell phone service. We were on our knees with our hands behind our heads. The man thought we were law enforcement officers there to bust his marijuana grow operation. We finally convinced him we were 18-year-old missionaries, and he let us go. The mission president did not care at all when we told him. He just said not to go back to the area. Additionally, I had a mission companion who threatened to kill me in my sleep by choking me to death. The mission president also did not care about that. He said the man had a history of threatening to murder his companions and to ignore it. Story 2. I visited my mission president to tell him about my intense anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation. He said, "That is normal if you are doing the work right. Half the time, I want to step in front of a bus." That statement harmed my mental health for the next decade. Story 3. I saw someone get shot and bleed out right in front of us. There was so much blood. I also saw 2 people burned at the stake on Halloween. I went home soon after. My mom still doesn't believe those things happened. Story 4. I was robbed at knife point by 2 men in broad daylight in Martinique. They did not see my black camera at the bottom of my black backpack, so they did not take anything from me. They took my companion's camera. He followed the thief, asking for it back, while the second man just stood awkwardly in front of me. I had only been there a few weeks at that point, so I barely spoke any French. I was so overwhelmed that all I could think to do was ask the man if he believed in God. I think he said yes, but I did not understand what he said after that. I was not scared of him, but I had so much adrenaline pumping through my body that I remember being frightened by how much my hands and legs were shaking while I tried to stay calm on the outside. When we reported it to the mission president, the person in charge of all the missionaries in a territory, his advice was not to tell our parents to avoid worrying them and just to avoid that apartment complex for a while. Story 5. 2 years of essentially no time to myself. Showering and the bathroom were it. Even then, you were encouraged to hurry, so you did not secretly take time off. Story 6. Maybe this isn't flashy or unique, but we were only allowed to talk to our family for 2 hours a year. 1 hour on Christmas and 1 hour on Mother's Day. It was gut-wrenching. This was also when the missionaries were only allowed flip phones without internet access. No internet use, no watching TV, and no other forms of media except for church-approved, church-related content, like Bible reenactments or recordings of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. I am pretty musical and had been playing guitar and bass a lot from high school into university. I was really into building weird instruments too. I completely gave it up for the mission since it was against mission rules to have anything like that with me. What was truly traumatic was that I had been brainwashed so fully that I wholeheartedly believed this kind of ascetic lifestyle was good for me. It broke me down into someone who could not think for myself and always looked to the mission authorities to fill my time and set my goals and vision. I worked hard like a machine. When the rules said I needed to be home by 9 p.m. and in bed by 10:30, I was not a minute late. If I was, I begged my God for forgiveness. I was literally transformed into someone else. I returned and made contact with some old high school non-Mormon friends, and it was super weird because I was weird. I was a brain-fried cult member who had lost their sense of self. It's been around 10 years since I got home from that 2-year-long brain scrambler, and I am still uncovering pieces of my personality and interests that I had buried and burned away because I believed I was saving souls. To summarize, what was traumatizing was the complete and utter loss of who I was. I will be working for the rest of my life figuring out who I could have been. Whenever I see missionaries on the street, I just get really, really sad. I hope they don't get too lost in the whole thing and remember to still be the human beings they are. Story 7. Had a gun pulled on me when I accidentally interrupted a drug deal on the streets of Detroit by asking if they wanted to hear a message about Jesus. I almost died that day and on many other days. I would never let my children serve a mission. Story 8. I watched a man get beheaded in the marketplace in Liberia, West Africa. Story 9. My companion and I were walking home after dark down a dimly lit road. 2 men, hiding behind a house out of our sight, ran up behind us, forced us to our knees, and stole our belongings. I had a gun pressed to the back of my head, and the man with me had a large Bowie knife at his chest. Yes, that was traumatic. This happened in the island nation of Cabo Verde, off the west coast of Africa. Story 10. Being an introvert with no time alone to decompress was difficult. It did not help that I was an atheist by that point and felt extra pressure to hide my lack of belief. Story 11. I was in Sri Lanka and got arrested for asking for directions. A gun was pointed at my head. The police came to our house, took our cash, and almost took our passports. This happened during the time when the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam were active. Story 12. Wow, my time to shine. I went to Santiago, Chile, between 2014 and 2016. About halfway through my mission, my district leader, who was like a missionary team lead, started touching me inappropriately and putting his hands in my lap. I confronted him about it, and he denied it, but he continued the behavior. To make a long and rather traumatizing story short, I did not report it. Instead, I prayed for forgiveness for both of us and pushed it to the back of my mind to continue my work. The most difficult part is that I only recalled that memory a couple of years ago during therapy, which was very intense. I also had a gun pointed at my face while knocking on doors, but that was because of a soccer match between Colorado and LA United. It was like a Super Bowl happening 3 times a year. I felt I kind of deserved that. Story 13. I was poisoned by a member who regularly provided lunches for the missionaries and was known for having animosity towards American missionaries. Or maybe it was just blatant racism. Either way, I spent a few days in the hospital. The mission president initially discouraged this, but after several hours of writhing on an apartment floor, he was convinced that this was serious and approved using some of the sacred funds to end my pain and suffering. The difficult part is that for most young missionaries, you are conditioned to believe that the more you suffer, the more you will be rewarded, either in this life with a better spouse or wealth or in the next life. I did not even recognize this as trauma, as most missionaries do not consider the possibility that their religious organization may be causing lasting harm. This experience, among several others, became a story to tell when people asked about my mission. Only after deconstructing and understanding my own decisions and actual feelings about God, religion, obedience, critical thinking, spirituality, agency, sin, and self-worth was I able to process these experiences and start living a life free of cognitive dissonance. Story 14. Honestly, it was the more than 90 hours of scheduled activities every single week. That, and the mission companion who yelled at me and threatened to hit me. I am gay and very much not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints now, but 18 years after the mission, I still had a nightmare about it last night. Story 15. Saw an 11-year-old girl get beaten by her uncle, who was a large man. We hid in the bathroom and called the bishop and the district leader. They basically said, "Yes, that happens. You cannot interfere with their discipline," and told us to leave. Also, one time we walked through an alleyway and, 20 feet away, saw another woman get jumped in that same alley. Additionally, we were told that your and everyone around you's eternal destiny depended on getting up exactly on time. Story 16. The constant rejection from normal people when you were trying to sell them Mormonism, which I was doing 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, all while living in a foreign country isolated from family and friends, and having to wear that uniform of a white shirt and tie and having my name taken away. You are elder so-and-so now, not allowed to use your first name. It has been compared to a 2-year hazing ritual where you become trauma bonded to the church, which is truly what it is. Another traumatizing thing was learning, decades after my mission, that what the church taught me to say to sell the church was entirely false and misleading. The advent of the internet exposed many lies. Story 17. One of my best friends who was in South Africa was pursued by car from a local gang. My friend ditched their van, hid in the tall grass, and thankfully got away. A kid I went to elementary school with was kidnapped by a gang in Tijuana, potentially because his father was in the military. Missions are definitely not safe, and missionaries can be a bit too naive or trusting, unfortunately. Story 18. I just found out that my dad had to pay for the chapel and his apartment rent out of his own pocket in the 1970s in France. He was poor as well. He bragged that he figured out if you ate dry oatmeal and quick for breakfast, you could drink water and feel full throughout the day. Making 19-year-olds pay to go on a mission, then pay for the chapel and pay for their apartment, all of which they have no control over, is disturbing. Story 19. I was assigned to serve as a branch president, similar to a pastor of a small congregation of fewer than 30 participating members, after the previous local branch president admitted to getting drunk and beating his wife. On my first day in the remote area, I was introduced to a family with 6 children. The youngest child was still breastfeeding, and the oldest, a 14-year-old, was deaf. The parents were asking the church for approximately $400 for travel and accommodations to a hospital about 4 hours away to get surgery for the mother. I thought it was routine gallbladder surgery. A few weeks passed as the request went up the chain through the mission president and the area authority. Their request was denied because they were not paying a full tithe. The parents scrounged up the money somehow and made the journey to the hospital, leaving their children in the care of their oldest child and an aunt. A month passed before the parents returned, but not to their home. They returned to the local hospital. It turned out the mother had pancreatic cancer. On Christmas Eve, the former branch president caught my companion and me on our way to our apartment and begged us to give the mother a blessing. We went to the hospital surrounded by her family. Her eyes were rolled back, and she was convulsing. My companion did not want to bless her, so I had the former branch president assist me. I blessed her to be healed according to her faith and the faith of her family. She died on Christmas Day, 2009. Christmas is still hard for me. A little over a week later, I visited a 17-year-old young man who had skipped church. I read to him Numbers, chapter 15, verses 32 to 36, a story about a man who was stoned for gathering sticks on the Sabbath. I told him he would not be stoned, but that he should still take obeying the Sabbath seriously. The last time I saw him, I joked that I better see him at church or he might get struck by lightning. He did not show up at church that Sunday. Instead, he was killed in a car accident with a bus. The funeral was held in a town over 2 hours away. The mission president denied my request to attend and dedicate his grave. I never told the family what my last words to their son were. I have never visited his grave. I blamed myself for his death. I could not reconcile why God would punish a 17-year-old for skipping church but would not answer my prayers to heal the mother of 6. Story 20. No robberies or guns or anything here. My appendix burst. I was training 2 new missionaries at the time, and they weren't allowed to drive yet. Nearly hallucinating from pain and poison coursing through my body, I drove to the doctor and hospital. I very nearly died. I spent 2 weeks in a rural hospital with about 15 beds. It might as well have been a veterinary hospital. I had drainage tubes coming out of 3 places in my abdomen. When it was time to go home, the nurses had removed all but one of the tubes. They told me to get dressed. I asked about the plan for the 3rd tube, and the nurse had an "oh damn" look on her face. She came back an hour later, took my pillow, and told me to lie flat and stay still while grabbing the armrests. She put a knee on my bed, placed one hand on my chest, and grabbed the tube like she was starting a lawn mower. She pulled on 2 tubes. I expected it on the 3rd. It was not painful but the weirdest, most uncomfortable sensation I can imagine. It felt like it was wrapped around every organ in my body and pulled all the oxygen out of my lungs. Later, I talked to my parents. They were told to prepare as if I were about to die. I had no concept of how close it was until that conversation. Story 21. I was abused by my mission president, the mission president's wife, and several others in leadership positions. It has been almost 10 years, and I still have nightmares about it all the time. Story 22. A large American city. My friend in the area next to me was involved in a home invasion. The people living there were saving money in cash for a down payment on a new home or something. Then 4 masked men broke in, tied everyone up with duct tape, and piled them together while they tore apart the home looking for the cash. Everyone got out unharmed but very shaken. However, possibly the worst thing happened the next day. They did not go outside. The senior companion rented a television and a gaming console from a local rental store, and they sat and played games. They were blamed for failing God's test of their faith by not converting new contributors for a few days. My brother in Brazil was robbed at gunpoint several times, and they stole his backpack. Story 23. A bus hijacking outside of Solola, Guatemala, in 1991. I had been stopped by a drunk with a pistol my first month into the mission and had been on buses that were stopped by guerrilla forces with machine guns a few times. They would just preach about the abuses of the government, then let us be on our way. But this was much worse. We were on an early morning bus, and it was still dark. A few minutes into our trip from Solola to the capital, 4 men stood up and pulled out shotguns or pistols. They forced the driver to take a dirt side road off the highway. No one was killed, which was amazing because they were not coordinated. They were very tense and screaming at the passengers and each other. At one point, one man was yelling for everyone to stand up, and another was yelling for everyone to sit down. They started collecting our wallets, purses, jewelry, and watches. The passengers were mostly shocked and quiet and complied. A few people were hit when they did not immediately turn over their items, like a German tourist who got kicked in the stomach when she complained that her passport was in her bag. My companion, who was Guatemalan, and I were seated near the back. Before they got to us, my companion grabbed most of the bills in his wallet and stuffed them into his sock. I shook my head at him, worried that they might kill him if they found that, but he just shrugged. We traveled several miles down the bumpy dirt road, then stopped in a remote, barren field. They ordered us to lie face down in the dirt. Then a truck pulled up next to the bus. I am not sure how many more robbers were in the truck, as it was still dark and my face was in the dirt. They started unloading and transferring the baggage over. I remember thinking we were likely to die and praying what I thought would be my last prayer as I lay there in the dirt. It never crossed my mind to try to be a hero and rush several men with guns. They left after a bit, just took off and left us there in the field. Some locals said the robbers were from the Guatemalan military. No police or anyone else showed up. We eventually got back on the bus and resumed our route. For a good while after that, I was very uncomfortable on buses, especially the between cities buses. Story 24. I could not make friends in 2nd to 4th grade because I was taught to try to convert everyone. Story 25. Robbed twice on the streets of Brazil. Once at knife point, once at gunpoint. Story 26. Did not happen to me, but a friend was repeatedly sexually assaulted by his companion. He reported it and they did nothing. For the record, I am no longer a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I have 2 stories about the church harming someone close to me who was sexually assaulted. I strongly oppose the church. Story 27. Several things, but this one sticks out in my mind. I got dengue fever and was in a lot of pain. When I told the mission president's wife, she told me to get back out and work, and if I didn't, they would send me home. I didn't want the shame of going home early, so I went out with a 102-degree fever and wasn't able to rest. I was in the Philippines, so it was very hot and humid. Absolutely miserable. Story 28. Realizing I was wasting 2 years in my formative years to sell a belief system I did not have conviction for. I hope to convert one person, myself. A great culture and organization that claims to be what it is not a great culture or organization. Leaving was the single hardest thing I have done. Story 29. My companion and I begged the mission president and other leadership for months to move us to a new apartment in a safer area. Our apartment was over 40 years old at the time and located in a high-crime area with constant gang violence. We were not allowed a car because previous vehicles had been broken into multiple times. My bike was stolen within the first hour of being there. About a week before I transferred, there was a double homicide in the apartment next door. Officially, it was a bad drug deal, but we were fairly certain it was related to human trafficking. I got into a shouting match with the assistants to the president when they said they wanted to pink-wash the area, meaning they wanted to replace the elders with sister missionaries. I told them directly how I knew that would play out. As retaliation, I was sent to a remote location for the remainder of my mission. Story 30. Gunshots every night. Ambulances would not come to get the bodies until sunrise. Story 31. Personally, the first thing I thought of was showering in the open around the poles in that big locker room they call the bathroom in the missionary training center, but that only came second to the washing and anointing ritual they did in the temple in the 1990s when you had to be fully nude while the older men put water and oil on your body. It was a strange religious practice, but at least we did not have to mimic slitting our own throats and disemboweling ourselves. I missed that earlier version by a few years. Story 32. Didn't serve a mission and thankfully left the church, but a girl I know was held hostage for 3 days, tied to a chair by her companion who had a psychotic break due to stress and anxiety. The mission president told her not to tell her parents that story until she got home. She is still active. It really blows my mind. Story 33. I had a companion who had some kind of psychotic depression. He threw knives at me a couple of times, and I just sat there and took it because I had no idea how to handle that situation. He told me he would hear voices from time to time. One day we were shopping at Walmart, and he said he wanted to buy an X-Acto knife for a friend in our congregation who was into scrapbooking. He looked at it for a minute, then decided not to buy it. Later, he said that if he wanted to kill himself, he would cut his neck with an X-Acto knife and let himself bleed out. Then it dawned on me that he was seriously contemplating suicide but backed out. Later in my mission president told me that my mother was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. They found it early, but I was obviously very upset and wanted to talk to her. However, I could only call her twice a year, and I still had a few months left before my next phone call. It is really upsetting now that I am out of the church. Story 34. Seeing other replies here puts things into perspective, and I do not think my experience holds a candle to some of the others, but I hated my mission. I already had tremendous self-esteem and anxiety issues, and my mission only made it worse. I did not realize at the time that the church planted a lot of my self-hatred. I was a Spanish-speaking missionary in Utah, and I hated going door to door. Alternatively, I made an effort to find people in the Spanish congregation I attended who needed help. I found fulfillment in helping others, but was constantly told that I was not doing good enough because I was not baptizing enough people. I felt every day that I was a failure and that God was disappointed in me because I struggled to convert people even though I was helping others in my own way. I was torn down for my anxiety around talking to complete strangers in a place that was not home. From where I sit now, all the church cares about is adding more people to the list of tithe payers under the guise of spreading the gospel. Many people were struggling, and instead of uplifting those whom I could easily help, I was berated for not doing things the correct way. Looking back, I am grateful and proud of myself for choosing to help others over pushing religion on people. I got lucky that COVID-19 hit, and I got to return home after only 8 months. I do not know what I would have done if I had to stay for the whole 2 years. Story 35. I never went on a mission, but my dad served in El Salvador around 1976 to 1978. He fell off a waterfall while trying to get a better view and slipped on a rock. All he saw was blackness underwater, and he wasn't sure which direction he was swimming. He managed to get to the surface. Another time, he saw a woman get murdered at a bus stop. He doesn't really talk about that. I never asked for details either. On a lighter note, he ate some bad lettuce once and hiked several miles with his companion, holding his muscles tightly to avoid an accident. He finally made it to a McDonald's and seriously considered using the sink until someone left the stall just in time. Story 36. May I ask, with this many bad experiences from just a small sampling of Reddit users, it must be a fairly common occurrence for traumatizing events to happen on missions. Doesn't that discourage many parents from sending their children? Story 37. As a former member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and missionary, I want to say to anyone reading this, please be kind to these individuals. I know they can seem awkward and annoying, but many of them are like beaten-down puppies who were brainwashed their whole lives into going. They face negativity from everyone all day, every day, their companion, the people on the streets, the mission leadership, and others. I truly hated every single day I was there and stayed because I believed I was doing what God commanded of me. It took me years to process and recover from the experience. Story 38. My first companion, who was supposed to be my trainer, was abusive and narcissistic and constantly lost his temper with me over the smallest things. I remember once he threatened to kill me because I was walking slightly faster than him. He was also a pathological liar, and it took some time for people to see what he was really like. Story 39. We went to visit a member who had recently lost his wife. He was the only member of his family, so she was going to receive a traditional Christian Orthodox funeral. We showed up at the wrong time, and many deeply Orthodox family members were there along with a group of professional mourners. They chased us down the street while hitting us with sticks. I was also constantly in dangerous situations. I was groped by creeps twice, proposed to by an old man who thought I could help him get to America, and chased twice by a rabid dog, the same dog. We also had to run from a psycho goat a couple of times. Other sisters in my mission were in an area so dangerous that the elders begged the mission president not to send sisters there. When he did anyway, they bought them mace because they were so afraid for them. They had real horror stories. But the most traumatizing part of a mission is feeling isolated, exhausted, and bored out of your mind while being told you have to say everything is okay and try to present the experience positively to your family back home. The intensity of your experiences, combined with the subtle brainwashing you get on the mission, leaves people feeling disconnected from themselves in a way that takes years to recover from. Story 40. I had some kind of cyst or something. Pus and blood were always leaking from it. I was weak, drained, and had a high fever. I started staying home. One night, I was going upstairs to bed, and the strain of going up the stairs was too much. My vision went completely black. I was awake. I did not pass out. I just could not see anything. Sat down on the stairs, and my roommates came and helped me up the stairs. I collapsed on the bed. Later, when I was feeling better and, thank God, I could see again, I called the mission president's wife, who was our medical coordinator, even though she had no medical training. She told me to just stay home and let her know if it got any worse. Story 41. This is not as intense as some of the experiences in this thread, but as a sister missionary in Chile who later realized I was transgender masculine, living as a pillar of femininity and enduring constant explicit catcalling really affected me. Story 42. Had the house behind my apartment pipe bombed and received a panicked 3 a.m. call from a new convert whose son was killed by a drive-by shooter. There were many gunshots and drive-by shootings in the mid-1990s. A homeless man stalked me from one side of the state to the other. I was a sister missionary and served in Nebraska. Story 43. I had the unique experience of being sent home early from my mission for disobedience, spending 13 months living with my parents working on myself to become worthy enough to return, and finally finishing my 2-year mission. I lied in order to be able to go on my mission. I did not confess to any sins during my interviews prior to leaving. I was afraid my church leaders would not allow me to go, and my entire future was riding on being a returned missionary. It is a common trope in Mormon culture that a worthy woman would never marry a man who has not served a complete mission. After a few months of severely struggling out in the mission field, I convinced myself the reason I was not having success with converting people, learning the language, and generally hating my mission was because I lied about my sins and God was refusing to bless me. I called my mission president one night sobbing and confessed everything from my youth. My mission president made me call my stake president from back home, the man I lied to in my interviews. After confessing everything to him, my stake president made me call my parents and confess everything to them. I was an angel in their eyes, and having to tell them all about my sexual experiences and drug use in high school shattered their image of me. It has been over 13 years and our relationship has never healed. It was a brutal night. I was allowed to continue serving, but after a year and 6 months, I could not take it anymore. I told my mission president I had no interest in following the rules and he sent me home early, dishonorably. The 13 months spent at home were hell. I was a pariah in the Mormon community, viewed as a selfish sinner who put myself before the Lord. I had friends tell me their parents did not want them spending time with me. I had to attend weekly addiction recovery meetings at my church building because I had viewed pornography since returning home. I vividly remember searching painless ways to kill myself because I was so ashamed and did not want to live anymore. My mom told me, "You either return and finish your mission or you are out of my house." I had no money because I had spent everything to my name on my mission. At the time, a 2-year mission was approximately $10,000. I did not feel like I had any other option than to return. My mom would not let me have a cell phone, laptop, or other devices. I had to ride the bus to work and needed to be home immediately after I got off. I was only allowed to attend church meetings and other religious activities. After 13 months and multiple rejections by church leadership to finish my mission, I was finally allowed to return to the mission field and complete my 2 years. It was awful. At that point, I was a shell of who I used to be, only going through the motions to please other people, mainly my mom. I am now happily married to an amazing woman who was never Mormon. I am very far removed from any religious community. Although I am happy with myself and where I have ended up in life, I cannot help but think about who I would be and where I would be if I was not born into Mormonism and pressured into such a bizarre and life-altering experience. I am only 32, but it feels like I have lived two very different lives. Story 44. A man threw rocks at our car, screamed, and was obviously under the influence. Just sad. Story 45. I saw a dead body floating down the river. Another incident involved the bus I was on. Someone shot at it. The window was shattered. I don't think they were targeting us, but I am not sure. This happened in Brazil in the early 2000s. Story 46. Spooky Mormon hell dream nightmare after arguing with my best friend who was also on the mission. Story 47. I got dehydration sickness while helping a couple of missionaries move to a new place. This was in the tropics in the South Pacific. I hadn't drunk any water that day yet, and it was only around 10 a.m. By the time I realized I was thirsty and sluggish, it was too late despite how much water I drank. I was bedridden for about 5 days with incredible nausea, headache, and body aches. Only on the 5th day, with some alternative medicine intervention, did I start feeling more than 50% normal. Drink your water, people. Story 48. I was robbed by 2 men during my first transfer from Mexico City to the next state. A knife was at my throat and a gun pointed at me. It did not scare me even a little bit then, nor ever after. Confusing. It turns out that most of my family and I have the condition aphantasia, which affects 2% of the population and makes us unable to imagine trauma and immune to post-traumatic stress disorder. Just knowing that would be a trauma, except I am immune to trauma. At the same time, many of us who have that condition tend to overreact to situations, mirroring the anger or other emotions of others. So, my lack of reaction when I was robbed was because the thieves were calm and controlled, and I mirrored that. Yes, I have a weird life. Story 49. 2 things. This all happened in Chile. Also, I am a former member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints now. 1, I got stabbed. It was some punk kids on a Saturday night. We just walked past them. And when we were past, one of them stabbed me in the back. It was winter and I had a lot of clothes on. The knife only went 1/4 of an inch in. The kid was about 15. If he had put more force into it, I would have lost a kidney. 2, we were out at the town square on a Saturday morning trying to contact people. Just handing out pamphlets and talking to people who were interested. This man in his 50s came up to us. He was way too excited to be talking to missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He told us he needed our help immediately. His daughter was sick, and we needed to give her a blessing. This was a common thing we would do. We always carried special blessed oil to anoint people and give them blessings of healing. Most blessings like this were for someone with a cold or fever. We would bless them to get better, and they usually did because modern medicine works even in South America. We arrived at this man's house and saw his daughter, who was probably around 25 to 30 years old. She had full-blown HIV/AIDS. This man was literally crying, asking us to bless his daughter and command her to be healed and to walk again. We didn't even know him. We had literally just met him 2 minutes earlier, and he was begging us to heal his daughter. Her skin was paper thin. She probably weighed only 80 pounds. Her skin had a yellow hue because her kidneys were failing. She looked toward us and tried to speak, but she didn't have the energy to say words. My companion missionary and I looked at each other with a "what are we supposed to do now?" expression. I anointed this woman with consecrated oil, and my companion gave her a blessing. I think he simply blessed her to be comforted or something similar. He definitely did not bless her to be healed. I don't think the man even heard what we said. He wasn't even a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We finished and he was crying his eyes out. He thanked us and then we left. We walked back to the town square, which was less than 1/4 of a mile from the man's house. I sat on a bench in the park contemplating what I had just seen. One of the other sister missionaries came up to me and asked what was wrong. I told her the story of what had just happened. She started using the commitment pattern on me. The commitment pattern was a manipulative technique that missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints used in the 1990s and 2000s when speaking with people. Elder excellent. What is keeping you from having faith in Jesus Christ and the power to give blessings of healing to people? She finished by testifying to me that she knew the power of the priesthood of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was real. I wanted to crawl in a hole and die, metaphorically. We never saw that man again. I think back on this experience from time to time. That was deeply upsetting. Story 50. I loved my mission. It was overall a great experience. That said, the most stressful experience I had was when my companion and I got to Skype home for Christmas at a member family's home between 2014 and 2016 during my time at the Indian Institute of Management. They were ordinarily very sweet people and had a son who recently returned home from his mission. Great people. My companion and I were using two desktop computers not in the same room. I know this was against the rules, but we were excited. We chatted with our families for our allotted hour, shared a meal with the family, said goodbye, and left. Simple, right? No. We headed home, and a couple of hours later the office missionaries called us with instructions to pack our belongings because we were getting emergency transferred out of the area in the morning. My companion and I were both very confused, but we started packing. The next day we left the area and were interviewed by our mission president. From him, I learned that right after we left, the family who let us Skype home called directly to the mission office and told them that my companion and I had Skyped our girlfriends and were being inappropriate with them. I was so dumbstruck that the mission president figured out it was nonsense, but because we had been in separate rooms, we had still broken a rule, never be alone. So we still got chewed out a bit and ended up leaving that area early because of the drama with that family. I never figured out why they said what they did about us. I followed up with the sister missionaries who replaced us, and they were equally confused. The family was cordial and friendly as usual to them. I don't have any hard feelings toward any of them. I just wish I hadn't allowed myself to be separated from my companion. For the record, my companion also maintained his innocence. He showed me several videos his mom took of him during the Skype call about 10 to 15 minutes apart, and I knew him well enough to know that he didn't have a significant other back home. So, I guess it was not terribly traumatizing, just incredibly stressful for a new missionary. After that, I was absolutely glued to my companion. I did serve in White River for a transfer and definitely had some scary situations there. But it was always after the fact that I'd look at my companion and think, wow, that was intense. The Skype call was the most stressed and nervous I've been in the moment during my whole 2-year mission. Other than that, I loved serving as a missionary. I grew and learned so much in those 2 years. Story 51. I saw a woman shot in the head in front of her 9-year-old boy. I had a gun put in my mouth during a robbery. I often saw extreme poverty, hunger, and suffering. It was really heartbreaking. There were many other experiences, but I blocked most of them out. I kept a very detailed journal, but do not read it. I am not in the church and am very happy now. I learned so much about the world and developed a level of compassion I never imagined I would have. Now I get to help many people. Life is funny. Story 52. After going through the temple for the first time and seeing all the cult-like actions in prayer circles, I was shell-shocked. People from my local church community said, "You get used to it." I could not see a future where I would be okay with that at all. Also, when I told people my feelings, they said I was not prepared enough for the temple. However, no one tells you anything beforehand. If you feel uncomfortable, it is because you did not do the work to prepare. I just felt gaslit because I did a lot of reading and attended classes, only to be told my feelings of discomfort were because I was not good enough or had not studied enough beforehand. Story 53. They took my name from me, my identity. I was told, "You are no longer first name, last name. You are elder, last name. Nobody needs to know who you are beyond that." Along with being told everything I enjoyed was now inappropriate. This really upset me. Combined with the cultural pressure around missions, It led to a loss of control over my life that contributed to suicidal thoughts. There was one time when we were teaching a teenage girl a lesson, and her father came in drunk. He had never been drunk in front of us before and had always been very nice. This time, he suddenly grabbed her by the throat. He was probably 6 feet 4 inches tall and over 300 pounds of Samoan muscle. My companion and I instinctively stood up and moved toward him to help her. He looked at us calmly and said, "What are you going to do?" Then he dropped her on the ground and told us to leave. We called our mission president, not the police, because we were brainwashed, and he told us just not to go back. That incident still haunts me. Nearly 20 years later, I think about it and hope she is okay. Story 54. Mine is not nearly as bad as some of the others here, but it still affected me deeply. We had a girl ready to be baptized. She was the sister of another member. She had been attending church for several months and was well integrated into the youth program. Half the congregation was planning on attending. The day of her baptism was her 18th birthday. The morning of the baptism, the girl's mother called her brother, yelled at him, and canceled the baptism. As the senior companion, I was the scapegoat. I got the blame. Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are often passive-aggressive when it comes to rejection. Some people were smiley and nice to our faces. Then I would hear what they said when I was not around. People stopped looking me in the eye while at church. A congregation leader approached me and told me several people said they had lost faith in the missionaries because of me. I thought I had lost the girl's soul. Her face haunted me at night. I was already stressed because I had an unsupportive companion, and we had lost most of our investigators dramatically in the previous weeks. The baptism falling through activated existing fault lines in my mind and shattered me. I started having strong impulses to run the car into a telephone pole. I was experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder spirals, depersonalization, and derealization. I had multiple emotional breakdowns daily. It was a miracle I was still somehow functioning through all this. When I approached my mission president about all the misery and pain I was in and expressed concern for my own well-being, his response was, "Welcome to discipleship." I do not necessarily blame him for this. He was not trained to recognize mental illness, and he was not trying to be mean. Regardless, it affected me profoundly. Even with all that and being gay, it still took me 10 years to finally leave. I reject the church. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.